Hello and welcome to Most Marvelous NYC, where we help you navigate the ins and outs of NYC. I'm Megan.
And I'm JT.
We are both licensed New York City tour guides, and we're your hosts today to help you have your most marvelous NYC experience. So every episode, we choose a different main topic to focus on. This week's episode is one that is very near and dear to both of our hearts. What is it, JT?
It's basically why take a tour?
Why take a tour?
You're in New York City, why take a tour? And in fact, you're anywhere. You're traveling anywhere. Why take a tour?
Now, since we're both licensed New York City tour guides,
we're a little biased, I think.
We are biased, but something that I will tell you is that working as a tour guide in New York City has really opened my eyes to all of the wonderful things that taking a tour can add to your travels, no matter where you travel. You could travel anywhere on the globe, a big city, a small town. And I really think that taking a tour will help you have your very best experience.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I kind of think that the reason why most people are maybe a little, I don't know that most people are a little worried, but I think there are a lot of people who are like, I don't know if I want to do that.
I have a really hard time convincing my friends and family when we travel to take a tour. I think I've turned them on and turned them all into huge fans. My last trip to Italy with my mom, we ended up taking 4 tours. And we're at the point where my mom was literally researching and trying to find a new tour for us to take. And that's how we ended up. We took a tour. It was. We took a tour with walks through city experiences. We ended up, I think it was called Crypts, Bones, and Catacombs. And it was literally our favorite thing that we did in New York City. It's the thing that we both still talk about. But I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people originally, they think, oh, I don't want to take a tour. And I'm curious why you think that is. What do you think people think of when they hear take a tour?
I think it's flashbacks.
Flashbacks.
I think people think back to their first tour experience. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, their first tour experience it's like elementary school, it's middle school, it's a field trip. It's someone very strict telling them that they're going to be tested on this later, and someone poking them in the bus.
I remember going to, I think it was Williamsburg, not New York City, is Williamsburg.
That would be a cool tour.
Colonial Williamsburg. And just because of my middle school mind at the time, the things that I really cared about, there was a cute boy that I liked. I wanted him to see me and be impressed by me. I really cared who I was sitting next to on the bus
at lunch.
And I really was not interested in learning about anything with Colonial Williamsburg. So it almost didn't even matter how wonderful the tour guide was.
The butter churning, the outhouses were not like big turn-ons for middle school Megan.
No, my mind was, I remember a fight over a seat on the bus, but I don't remember the butter churning. And I think that memory in my brain then turns into, as you say, there was somebody strict giving me the information. Flashbacks. Somebody strict giving me the information, somebody not entertaining because I don't remember them, even if they were entertaining. So I do think that we have this.
And wondering, does this count? Or are we going to be tested on this? What is the point? Why are we here? I like being in school. Well, I'm comfortable being in school. Why am I all of a sudden on a bus and in this weird place and having to navigate? I normally sit at a lunch table with 6 people. This table has 12 people. Who am I going to sit with? Right. There's all these weird associations, but that's not what a tour is. I mean, we could make it like that if someone wanted a custom tour. Take me back to my 5th grade field trip. Okay.
We can definitely recreate that for you. But I think that you mentioned an interesting thing, which is what are the different types of tours that you can take? So we established this idea of our core memories of this being very educational and something that we weren't interested in. But now I find that these tours are something that I really crave. And there are so many different types of tours than I ever imagined. And let's go into the different types of tours.
And there's different subjects for tours, right? So that's one thing. But one of the things that I think people should be aware of before they even get into any of the rest of this is what kind or maybe even style of tour fits best for you, right? What kind of a person are you? And also, to be honest, like, what's your budget? So you can think about most tours, and it's really hard to say that there are a significant number of tours that fall out of these three main categories. So you have your private tours, right, where it is just you and the guide, and you have a significant amount of leeway and latitude in terms of potentially timing. There can be like pre-scheduled private tours or like really customized private tours. There can be semi-private tours. I work for a company, and the semi-private tour is basically smaller than eight or smaller. So I technically had a semi-private tour today that ended up as a private tour. It's 3 people.
And on a semi-private tour, because this is a tour that I personally have not given, my specialty is customized private tours, but the semi-private tour is something that I've begun to hear a lot more about. And you mentioned that it's no more than 8. Could it be 8 people who are traveling solo and all just happen to book it? Does it tend to be more like 2 families of 4?
And the thing that's different, so you think private tour, kind of get that. Semi-private tour, what's that? It's the semi-private tour is really in contrast or like in opposition to the mass public tour.
I call them high volume tours.
Mm-hmm. So that could be like 25 people, as many people as the tour guide feels comfortable speaking to in public.
And technically, I would say something such as a double-decker bus or one of the boat tours falls into this high-volume public tour. And an advantage to these public tours is there's a sense of anonymity. A lot of people don't necessarily want to be best friends with the tour guide, while other people really want to be the best friend with the tour guide. It's very sweet. And also,
nobody wants to be my best friend.
It tends to be, if you're somebody who wants to wake up in the morning and say, it's a beautiful day, I feel like taking a tour of Central Park, the high volume tours, those are something that you can book really last minute, generally.
2-3 tours a day, really easy and very low, like you just don't, it's like low commitment, low stress. You show up, there's going to be no, like you said, there's going to be no focus on you. There's going to be 20 other people, most likely. And it's very easy. There's no arranging. You don't have to explain what you want. You just go, you have an experience, you're anonymous or not, and then you're done. And they typically tend to be shorter duration. Some of them, Statue of Liberty, obviously, is going to be a longer duration. At some point, we're going to talk about that in one of our episodes.
It does,
but it's just easy. It's just easy, and you're going to typically pay less for that than any of the other options.
It is way more cost effective. It also tends to be much more rigid. For example, when I do one of the high volume tours for Statue of Liberty, we have set times. Like, you're going to have 20 minutes to explore the island, and then you have to meet back at a meeting point, or else you get left behind and you don't get to move on to the next one.
You just figure it out for yourself after that.
Where the private tour, if you are really loving Liberty Island and you're like, my dream is actually to spend 5 hours in this museum reading every single plaque, really learning about the copper, you can do that on a private tour. I'm curious about a semi-private tour.
So a semi-private tour is really interesting because it gives you that higher degree of interaction. So, for example, you have 8 people and you feel like you're always going to get the attention of the tour guide. You're going to be able to talk to them, ask questions. It's going to be a more cohesive group. For those, when I do a large group, I don't always do the, where are you from? What are you looking like? What have you done? For a semi-private, I always do that so people get to know each other and feel like, maybe they've met a new person. I have people give advice. What's one thing that you've done already that you've really loved in New York City so far? So it's almost like they get to share tips with each other. And it's just feels more manageable. You can move a little more quickly, and sometimes you can customize with a smaller tour like that, depending.
And I
But
do
it's
want to
comfortable.
mention,
It's really comfortable. It's a nice size. You feel like you're not being herded from one place to another, ideally. And again, that typically is at a more affordable price point than a private tour or a custom tour.
and I do want to mention with the private tours, usually when I talk about private tours, and I imagine when you talk about private tours, we're very specifically thinking of like one family or one person or one group of friends. But private tours also include corporate groups, student groups. A lot of the tours that JT and I give are private student groups. And sometimes these student groups can be 500 people.
Yeah.
But the idea is they are private. So they create an itinerary. Sometimes the tour guide works really closely to develop that itinerary. Sometimes there's a special travel agent that does that, but you are really customizing the tour for your corporate group, your student group, your
Very
senior
specific.
group. So the private tours, they can be kind of a large group if you want it to be, but the high volume public tours, you really have something that's set out. They usually advertise something like, we have these 5 stops, and you really are going to hit those 5 stops, rain or shine. And there's
Yes.
something really, really wonderful about that as well.
I like those tours. I mean, for me, I really like to jam a lot in. And so sometimes for me, knowing that it's like that tour goes off at 5 o'clock and it's like, great, we're going to be on that tour, going to do everything else to get up to it. Sometimes with custom, like I get sometimes why that's hard, because you have to make a lot of decisions. What time? I don't know. Should we do that at 3? Should we do it at 3:30? Should we do it at 4? Like, what should we talk about? I don't know. I really just want the tour guide to do it. And like I do private tours, and they are very distinct in a way. They're at a specific venue, but like today, my group, it was just a family. I said, what is it that you're most interested in seeing? And we were able to completely check all that stuff off the list. Halfway through, we sat down. I said, here's how much time we have left. What are your top priorities for the remainder of time that we have? Um, I I think it's really just good to think about in terms of degrees of flexibility and customization. And there are some nuances. Like you said, we do private tours for a busload of 50 people. They're essentially private tours. We're not letting anybody beside that school group or anybody besides that corporate group in. It's specifically designed for their needs and for what they're looking to do in New York City. But it's not the same thing as like a private custom tour with a family of 3 or 4 in an Escalade, where we're just, like, I've always wanted to see X, Y, and Z. But the next thing I think is to talk about the reality that there are private and custom, semi-private, and public or high volume tours in a lot of different experiences and facets of any given city. So I think that's the next thing that we should probably talk about.
Yeah. Do you want to take that
No,
on?
you go ahead.
Well, I have this lovely little thing that says different types of tours. Oh, and then we have what you can
Yeah, what
do
can you
on
do
a
on a tour?
tour. So, what can you do on a tour? So, on a tour, you can walk, you can fly, you can drive, you can be on a boat, you can bike. We have so many. You can eat, you can shop, you can delve into a topic of history. You can do a really big deep dive. You can explore different neighborhoods. I personally like to take a tour on like the first day of a trip. And if I take a tour on the first day of that trip, it gives me an idea of the city. I get an idea of what the layout of the city is.
Yeah.
Sometimes the tour guide will give me some lingo. When I was in Morocco, there was a very specific word and I don't remember the word. I wish I did. But when you go
But when you were in
to
Morocco, you remembered the word.
I did.
Yeah.
And when you go to these markets in Morocco, you haggle
Mm-hmm.
prices for different items. And sometimes the sellers can be very enthusiastic about getting you to purchase their tagine or their candle or their, argan oil. And there's this very specific word that you say, and when you say it, they're like, "Oh, she's a local. I'm going to
She knows.
not,
It's the
scam
secret
her
word.
or heckle her." So, yeah, that secret word was something that I would not have known if I did not take a tour. So, in many ways, that gave me a little insight into local culture, local customs, and made the trip safer. So, something that I think is really wonderful to know is when you come to New York City, there is a tour for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There is a pizza tour. I wish I got a commission for every time
Yeah.
I sold a Scott's Pizza tour, but my co-producer, co-creator, fiance, David, and I took a Scott's Pizza tour years
Scott's a
ago,
legend.
and it was one of the best dates that we've ever done. We still talk about this tour. So you can take a tour. I strongly recommend Scott's Pizza tours.
There's
Um,
bagel tours.
Cupcake tours,
Mhm.
sweets tours, a food tour of Chelsea Market. If you really want something that you can't get anyplace else, there is a foraging tour
Oh,
of
yes.
Central Park.
That's another legendary kind of o oddball tour. And a lot the funny thing too is that something like that foraging tour of Central Park tends to be locals. That's a very New York-centric tour, and it's one of the funny things. I think a lot of New Yorkers don't think, "Oh, I could do a tour." Right? But I do actually get a lot of New Yorkers who say, like, "I've done this before." I do a museum tour. Say, "I've done this before, but I never really knew what I was doing." Right? So I wanted someone to actually explain stuff to me and show me what I was really looking at. And so you get New Yorkers who will do a Revolutionary War tour or an architecture tour. There's a great architecture boat tour that I've taken, and it's just fantastic. It's very kind of granular, very in the weeds, very detailed. And that's a beautiful boat tour. Being out on the water is a favorite thing of mine. But there are so many aspects. New York City, in particular, I think is really great for all of the different opportunities that it affords, both in Manhattan and then in places like Brooklyn, or the hip hop tour in the Bronx, or street art tours in Queens or Brooklyn. There is an incredible diversity of tours. And like you said, there's the helicopter tours and the bike tours. People love the bike tours. It's not just Central Park. There's lots of bike tours around the city that you can take. It's I know we're forgetting stuff
Well,
too.
I took a tour. This is like a little hidden gem, and hopefully it will go viral after I mention this on
Oh,
the
good.
podcast. But there
Most New
is
Yorkers are like, I hope nobody ever hears of this again.
there
My secret.
Well, I don't even think most local New Yorkers know about this, and it's one of
Oh, I'm
my
excited.
favorite hidden gems. So there is a store. It's technically a sweatshop, but when you go in, you'll realize it's not a sweatshop the way that you imagine a sweatshop to be. It is called M&S Schmalberg. M&S Schmalberg makes these beautiful fabric flowers. If you
Oh,
watched, Sex in the
mm-hmm.
City, they
Yep.
made these fabric flowers for Sex in the City. They made fabric flowers for the Rockettes. They make fabric flowers for a lot of the designers that you
I think
see
you've
at
told me
Fashion
about
Week.
them.
I
I've never done it.
In many of my videos, I'm wearing these fabric flowers in my hair. I get them put on barrettes and I put them in my hair, but lots of people will buy them for wedding bouquets, apparently, because they
Oh,
won't dye. They're fabric flowers, but they give you a tour and this tour is wonderful. You get to see the flowers actually being made. Some of the equipment that they use to make these fabric flowers is over 100 years old. They're the same things that they've been using for over
Wow, that
100
is so
years.
cool.
They don't manufacture these, like they press the flowers. They don't manufacture these pieces anymore. So they really, like, there's these treasures and you get to hold them, which is, you get to see how heavy they are. And they talk about
Wow.
how they made these flowers 100 years ago, how they make them today, the differences, the similarities, and everything is made by hand. Every single thing. And you meet the people, there are these ladies that fold the fabric and glue them together. And they literally offer tours of M&S Schmalberg. So you can go in and take a tour and it's wonderful.
That is very cool. There is really just so much to do. So I guess let's talk about what are some of the benefits of taking a tour. I think we've already kind of talked, we've already touched on some of them, but I know that there's one thing that you and I both really agree about that we have not talked about yet, which is the inside knowledge of so many tour guides.
I feel personally that having a tour guide, whether or not you are on a high volume tour, a semi-private tour, or a private tour, your tour guide becomes your personal concierge. You can ask them any question. Now, we are humans. We might not know the answer, but we
Well,
might be able, we'll know how to find it.
I know all the answers.
He does.
But
you can ask them questions like, where should we eat? Or I only have 24 hours left in the city. What do you recommend I do? Or I have 2 kids, age 5 and 7. What Broadway show do you think we should see? I actually think that asking your tour guide what Broadway show you should see is the best person to ask, because they'll have just spent some time with you. They understand your energy. They can tell if you're going to want like a really serious play or like a fun, really dancey musical, and they'll help you choose your perfect Broadway show. They can help you find an amazing piece of pizza.
You seem like a prayer for the French Republic kind of a couple.
Well, sometimes you have groups.
That's a pretty serious show.
You have groups that really want to dig deep into Jewish history. And if that tour that I just gave was Jewish history, and I can tell that they really
Lower East Side.
Yeah, prayer prayer for the French Republic might be the thing that they want. And sometimes that they want a dance party, and then I tell them to go see Moulin Rouge.
Yeah.
So I think that this is something that's really special, and you can ask them literally anything. Where can we go shopping? We're looking for really frilly dresses. Now, I mean, maybe that's just a question you can ask me, but I feel like most guides have a working knowledge of the city and will help you get your very best recommendation.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love, I actually think that a lot of times I have too much in my head. Right. And if someone says, what should I do next? I'll be like, I don't know. Like, I got 17 ideas for you. But when people sort of say, like, here's what we're looking for, like, what should we do? Like, my daughter, this wasn't even that hard, is I knew that it was a mom and a daughter. The daughter was an art student thinking about art college. And they said, like, where should we go for dinner? What should we do? I said, you really need to do, you should go down to St. Mark's Place, go hang out in the East Village, walk down St. Mark's until you get to the park, turn around, like explore that area a little bit, and then go eat at like one of my favorite restaurants, Veselka, right? That'll be a very like East Village kind of art student, because that's where I hung out when I was an art student. That's like a great experience. And I was so happy because I got a text from them the next day and said, we did exactly what you said. And it was exactly what we were looking for. And so structuring those questions, I think, is also really useful. And saying, like, what Broadway show, or we're trying to decide between X and Y. What do you think? You know us a little bit now. What neighborhood should we explore next? Those kind of structured questions. Tour guides they really love that. And especially if you are in a semi-private, you get a group of 8, group of 4, and you really have spent the last couple of hours getting to know them, your tour guide is going to be a really great resource for you. And so that's an added little bonus.
You are so right about all of that. And I have something to even add on to why the tour guide recommendations are amazing. Being a content creator as well, I kind of know how some of this sausage is made in terms of recommendations, whether or not it's a newspaper article, an article from a publication, something that you see on TikTok or Instagram. I will say that I have yet to meet a single influencer, content creator, journalist who would ever recommend something that they do not fully endorse. So everything that they post, I do truly believe is something that they've experienced and that they have loved. So I want to preface it with that. But a lot of times you will see these articles and there'll be a link. And when you go to the link, you'll notice it's an affiliate link.
Right.
So they're making a little extra money, which I think is well-deserved because they work very hard. But the tour guides tend to not work off of affiliate links. I think there's even a law against it.
Yeah, there is.
So with this knowledge, they are using their entire resource library, not omitting things that maybe don't give them a little bit of a kickback. They're using their entire resource library to help you get your very best New York City experience.
Yeah, and a lot of times people have connections with these places. They're neighborhood places. I think in the past we've talked about how people want to be in a neighborhood. A lot of people sort of next level tourism say, I want to be in a neighborhood, and to ask a tour guide, what's your favorite place in that neighborhood? It kind of adds that extra layer. It's not just some random place. It's not a place that's famous. It's the place that I always go to. People say, well, what's your favorite bagel? I say, my favorite bagel is my local bagel. It's the bagel that I go and eat every time but it's around the corner from where I live. So, but you should go there and I'll tell you what's great about it. And I'll maybe be able to tell you the name of the guy behind the counter. So that's, I think, adds that extra little special to it also. I think the next thing we should talk about is how to get the most out of your tour, which is, we're kind of getting into that already. But I think there's a couple of aspects of this that we haven't touched on yet.
I think that this is really important. I remember getting so frustrated just before the pandemic because I would have all of these private tours scheduled and I felt like people weren't getting the most out of their tours. And I don't know where the disconnect came from, but our goal is to help you get the most out of your tours. So there's a couple of different things.
There's very few tour guides who are doing this work and are interested in just kind of phoning it in. I think people who are out in the field want to give the visitor the best possible experience. They are unofficial ambassadors. They are, by their DNA, boosters for the city. They want you to see and feel excited to be in New York City, in that neighborhood. So there's lots of high energy.
Now, in terms of getting your very best tour experience, there's a couple of bits of advice that I would give. So the number one thing, no matter what, is to check the weather. Dress for the weather.
For sure.
What you see on Instagram isn't real. I mean, yes, because sometimes I am that person in a dress dancing around in the snow, but I promise you that is not how I walked to the area to take the photos in the snow. You want to be comfortable on your tour. You want to be comfortable on your trip to New York City. So you really want to check the weather. You want to wear proper footwear, your comfiest shoes. Don't worry if they match your outfit or not. You want your comfiest shoes for each type of weather. I have a pair of Hokas, which are amazing. I feel like I'm walking on clouds. So when it's warm enough, I wear Hoka sneakers all the time. It doesn't matter. I'll be wearing a fancy dress and I got those sneakers on. And today we're having a little bit of snow and sleet. I find Timberlands for me tend to be very comfortable and they're waterproof.
Yeah, I was wearing my Merrill boots today.
Yeah, and then we both changed when we got here because we didn't want to be in our wet walk through the
my boots are not
snowshoe.
wet. My boots are nice and dry.
Even our co-producer, co-creator David is wearing his best waterproof shoes today, and it gets really slippery. So you want it to have good traction while you're walking through that snow. You want to be wearing the warm socks. If it's cold, you want to be bundled up properly. Wear your hat, wear your gloves, wear your coat, wear your long underwear. I love Heat Tech from Uniqlo. I don't know if you have any.
I'm wearing it right now. I love it.
And fleece tights from, I think it's called Calzedonia. They are my best friends in the winter. Oh, and I have these electric.
We should have an affiliate link for those.
I know. I just was like, hey, but I do have
if
affiliate
you want to
links.
sponsor us, Uniqlo, us and Roger Federer.
Come on, Uniqlo. I do have an Amazon storefront. I will be very upfront and say that I do get kickbacks from that. But this Amazon storefront, again, it's all things that I truly believe in, as I believe everyone who I've ever met that has an affiliate link. It's something that they 100% do believe in. So these rechargeable hand warmers, they are amazing.
I've never done that.
They're like hot hands, but they're like, they literally charge in like an iPhone and they get really, really warm. And every time I've been at an event, covering an event, like I'll bring extras and let people borrow them. And I'm converting the world to electric hand warmers. So that is a good tip in cold weather. What about hot weather?
I think for hot weather, you just need to be aware. Be aware that it's going to be hot. Be aware, don't overdress. Be ready for it. Bring your water bottle if you can. The one thing that I was thinking, apart from seasonal dressing, which I do think is really important, and being prepared to walk, because New York is a walking city and a lot of these tours are walking tours. Read the details to find out if it is a walking tour and really understand. Be honest. I think that's I have a couple of principles. Be honest, but also kind of be selfish. So be honest. If you know that you can't walk 2 miles, that's fine. Just let the tour guide know, especially if it's a private tour. If it's a public tour, high volume tour, let them know in advance. If you have mobility issues, if you're on crutches, if you need a wheelchair, don't hide that. Don't think you're going to be able to push through. Be honest about it. If you let your guide know, especially private, semi-private, even with a big high volume, let them know. And we're going to talk about the easiest way to get in contact with a tour company. Let them know. So that's one thing, is be upfront about mobility challenges and mobility issues. That's something that I frequently ask when I reach out to guests. Is there anything that's going to make traveling these 2 miles difficult, or walking for this period of time difficult?
I would actually argue that on a public tour, it might even be more important to be honest upfront. Well, on the public tour or on the private tours and the semi-private tours, we can really make adaptations, and we can make adaptations on the spot. And if you're very honest about whatever it is, be it a physical or a visible or an invisible disability, we can accommodate it, but only if we know. And on the public tours, I think that it's important to be honest with yourself to know how much walking you can do. I've had some guests who were like, this is going to be my time to prove to myself that I can walk, 3 miles in 5 minutes. And it ended up frustrating them considerably and even ending up in tears because you're trying to keep up with this whole group. So if you are honest about what it is that you need for walking, and then if you are very upfront with the guide can make accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
But again, only if they know. And of course, if you think that, you can, I find that walking in New York City is very different than walking anyplace else. So
Yes.
if you're on the tour and halfway through you're like, "Oh my goodness, this is a lot of walking," you can always change your mind, but again, communicate with the
Mm-hmm.
guide, and the guide, at least the guides that we know and work with, they know how to adjust to make sure that everybody gets a great experience.
The other thing that I wanted to say in terms of this, and in terms of being selfish, is do what it is that you really want to do. I think there's a lot of New York that's famous and a lot of New York that people have seen on social media. Do what you really want to do. Don't just try to check off someone else's bucket list. And so don't be afraid to take the cemetery tour, right? Don't be afraid to do that stuff. Don't say like, well, I can't do the cemetery tour and, take these photographs that I've seen on Instagram, which I'm not even really sure why I want to replicate. And it's going to take me like 3 hours to do it. Do what you want. It's most likely going to be available to you. So why not take the opportunity to do that or learn the thing that you've always wanted to learn? Sort of stretch a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Go with a guide to a neighborhood that you're curious about, but thought you might not want to go to on your own. Maybe it's so far away. It's someplace in Brooklyn, or maybe it's a neighborhood that you thought had a bad reputation, but have heard interesting things about it now. Go and do it. Be brave. New York is a great place to experience new ideas, new ways of thinking, but also at the same time, do what it is that you want to do. I think those are two really important things. And that goes into tours. And I think that goes even beyond that, just towards planning your trip. I know we sort of talked about planning your trip in a previous episode. But I think those are two really important keys to getting the most out of your tour and your experience in New York.
I do feel in New York City, there is a tour for everyone, no matter what your interest is. If you Google it, you will be able to find a tour to take covering a topic. And there's also tours of all different price points. We have a company called Free Tours by Foot, which is arguably not free because you're really supposed to tip, and they suggest how much you should tip.
Mm-hmm.
But it is technically a free tour. You really need to tip. I will judge you negatively if you don't. But
a lot of those guides, I think that what's interesting about the Free Tours by Foot model is that the guides know they have to work extra hard to really impress everybody with their energy, with their humor, with their facts, with their stories. And I think a lot of people are like, what is this? And a lot of the guides who do it say, I get rewarded for going the extra mile. And so like you said, there are price points for everybody. You can spend a lot of money to get an absolutely customized tour with an absolutely spectacular guide who is getting paid that amount of money because they are bringing the energy and the excitement and the depth of knowledge as well. And you will get exactly what you want because you are right there at the beginning planning that out with them.
And there's also things such as the High Line offers free tours on certain days of the week. I went into the New York Public Library with David, just wandered in. We went to their treasures exhibit and ended up on a free tour, which was magnificent. We saw Winnie the Pooh.
I love the treasures exhibit.
What are your favorite things in the treasures exhibit? Maybe that's a rabbit hole.
That is a rabbit hole. It changes. That's the wonderful thing, is some of the things remain the same. I've always loved going to the library to see Winnie the Pooh, but some of the other stuff changes. They had a lot of Virginia Woolf stuff, which was really fascinating. And just some science stuff. There's a cookbook there It's like the first time that anybody talked about olive oil in the English language in a cookbook. Just amazing stuff.
So there's all of these tours that will uncover things that you didn't even know that you wanted uncovered. And some of them are free and some of them are expensive and some of them are mid-range. You will find something for you at every price point. I do want to talk about a special tour that I do with our sponsor, Welcome to Times Square. It is a Times Square billboard tour. And what we did very specifically with
There's billboards in Times Square?
There are billboards in Times Square. And what we did very specifically with this is we designed a midtown tour where we go to a lot of highlights in the Times Square area. We really delve into the history. And then at the end of it, you get to see a photo of you on the Welcome to Times Square billboard, which is a billboard in the heart of Times Square right next to the red steps. So you can either do this with this tour with me. You can visit TheMeganDaily.com to book that tour. Or if you just want to see your face on the billboard, go to TimesSquareBillboard.com to find out how you can get you or your brand on the Welcome to Times Square billboard.
Of all the billboards, that one is the most marvelous.
I do think it's the most marvelous. I'm a big fan. And I do have a code. Speaking of affiliate links,
I love the discount codes.
It is Megan10 and you'll get 10% off. So fun fact from our sponsor.
There we go. So how do you find and book a tour? I think that's like, we're really coming to that. I hope that we have convinced people that taking a tour is something that they ought to do for a lot of really good reasons. And they know what they're going to get with a tour. How are they going to get? You're just going to stand in Times Square.
This is
tour.
This is such a great question. And I do wish that there was something in Times Square where you could just walk in and possibly take a tour if there's a guide. That's such a brilliant idea.
Well,
and hear that, Times Square Alliance?
Hello.
That would be a really great idea for there to be a booth in the heart of Times Square that either has tour guides ready to take people on tours or has information about where you can get a tour. But in terms of finding a tour, I find that this can be really, really tricky because of our good friend SEO. So SEO is search engine optimization, which makes using Google a little tricky because people can pay a lot of money and like work out certain blog entries to show up really high. So it can be a little tricky, first of all, just to find a lot of the little boutique tours. But as you mentioned earlier about being very specific with your questions, if you are very specific with your searches, so for example, cupcake tour of New York City or cupcake tour of Brooklyn, you will be more likely to find those little boutique things rise to the top. So as specific as you can get. But
I have had people, and I think it generally works out okay. I have had people on my tours who thought they were booking a tour with the venue because the SEO has placed that paid link, that sponsor link at the top of the page. They clicked on it and in some cases, they paid way more than they would have had to pay for just venue entry. And they ended up, and they said, I didn't know that I had a tour. It's like, well, that's what happens. You have to be very specific. You have to be good about your search. And you have to know that this is a place where people are taking advantage of the opportunity that they have to get at the top of the search page.
And New York City, I feel, is like the target for all of
It is a big industry in New York City. Yeah.
Now, in terms of, I am always a big fan of booking direct. That means that you are booking
100%.
exactly with the company. We're going to talk about booking third party in just a minute, but I do want to talk about booking direct, what that means and what the advantages are. So when you book direct, you are booking with the company. That means that you are going to get the best rate, but you are also going to get direct contact with the company. There's going to be no third party in between. If you have any questions, you have their direct contact information. If there's inclement weather, they have your contact information and will be able to contact you directly. I really, truly believe that you are going to get the very best customer service, which means that you are going to get your most marvelous New York City experience if you book direct. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is when you're booking, and I had that experience today, is there was snow today. And so I was in communication with my guests last night. I said, there's going to be snow. Stay tuned, right? Like, don't ignore your phone tomorrow morning, because I may be telling you that there's a delayed opening or that the tour has to be rescheduled. So having that direct communication really makes the day go easier. I have 2 tips. Give a real email address and give a real phone number. Give a phone number that you're going to be able to access or that you're going to have with you during your travels. If you give your home phone number, it does nothing for me. I cannot text you. I want to text everybody the night before. I'm not going to be able to get in touch with you. And if you're here in New York City and I'm trying to call your landline back in, Dubuque, what good is that going to do? I'm going to talk to your answering machine, and your answering machine. What is this, the 80s? It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to make those contacts, which are really important.
And I did see that Statue of Liberty had a delayed opening today, I believe. So a lot of people who were going to the Statue of Liberty, it would have been important to get in contact with them and say, hey, our tour is either canceled today and going to be moved to a different day, or these are your options. You can select a refund.
I mean, maybe they were looking forward to standing in Battery Park for 3 hours in the cold. Who knows? I don't want to judge.
And if you have their real email and their real phone number that you can send a text to, you can actually communicate with them and figure out the best option moving forward. So that's really, really great advice. So now we should maybe talk about why
there's another way to book.
Why we're so adamant about booking direct. And that is there are what are known as online travel agents. We call them OTAs for short. These are literally third-party sites. So a third-party site is exactly what it sounds like. That means you're going to book through them, and then every time you want to communicate with the company that you actually booked a tour with, you are going through that third-party site. I don't know if we should actually name them. Should we name them? So we're not going to name them.
But you know what's funny is I have people who show up and they use the names of these third-party sites and they say, I'm taking a tour. And my colleagues, I take a deep breath and I say, I'm sorry that I can't help you. It's essentially like showing up at the airport and saying, I booked an Expedia flight.
It's exactly like that.
Where am I supposed to go?
Exactly like that. It's booking with these companies. You are so correct. It is like saying I booked the Expedia flight, the 6:30 Expedia flight. And sometimes, for example, Statue of Liberty, again, we'll have a bunch of companies
my gosh, so many people.
We'll have a bunch of companies meeting at the same time. And when they come up and they
sometimes
say,
in the same general vicinity, oftentimes not. So you have to be running from one to the other saying, am I on your list? Am I on your list? Am I on your list? And the third parties don't want you as the guest to know the name of the company that you're touring with, because they'd rather continue to receive your business and they don't want you to book direct the next time. Correct. They don't want you to tell your friends, oh, you should go on the TheMeganDaily tour.
Correct.
Right? Or Most Marvelous NYC tour, because then they lose a significant chunk of commission that they get for being the in-between. Now, the upside, to be honest, I understand why people do it.
I do too.
You Google something and you see, oh my goodness, there's this third party, this OTA, and they have got A ton. They have got almost everything that I'm looking for, I think. It's hard. It's the funny thing is that you don't realize what you're missing oftentimes.
Exactly. Not everybody can even afford to book or list. Not every company can afford to list on an OTA because they can take up to, I have heard numbers as high as 60% of
Yeah.
a ticket sale, but it's usually closer to like 20 or 30%.
Which
But
is still a lot.
and if you're something like a food tour, that includes like the ticket price includes food. So
Mhm.
if you are getting 30% of that taken out, and then I think there's a whole thing about how you can't like raise the prices on the OTA. So for example, my company is not listed on any of the OTAs because that's just a huge amount of commission for me. You will find some really great companies on there, though.
I agree.
I'm a big fan of many companies that get their entire business from an
Mhm.
OTA, and many tour companies say, you know, marketing is really expensive and it
Yep.
takes a lot of work. And these OTAs are going to take care of all the marketing for me. And that's the only way really to book their tours. I think you
And it's
can
worth
book.
the headache,
Yeah.
right?
I think you can book direct with all of these companies, but the only marketing they do is through the OTAs because it's effective. And I
Mhm.
see these being very, very full tours. And the other advantage, as you mentioned, is just the ease. If you're in a new country, a new city, it's overwhelming. It is so overwhelming. There's so much. Sometimes you're dealing with a language barrier.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're just like, oh my goodness, I haven't slept because I had a
Jet lag.
12-hour flight to get here. So to open up one of these apps
You don't
and
necessarily know the questions to ask
yeah.
Google or whatever search engine is your preferred search engine.
And it gives you an idea of all the options. Like, you maybe wouldn't ever think I don't think that M&S Schmalberg is listed on them, but you might not ever think, "I I should take a fabric flower tour of New York City." So there's some really great options on them. There are advantages and disadvantages to the OTAs, but I'm just a big fan of using that very super specific search and
There's another way to search.
yeah.
It's a way that we're both familiar with because we're both members of this organization.
There is.
You can go to a guides association website. New York City has its own guides association called GANYC, or GANYC.org. And you can look up all sorts of different options for tours, and you can scroll through tour guides. You can see our faces. We're both GANYC members. I'm a former GANYC officer. You've done a lot for GANYC during the years that you've been a member.
I think I was technically on the marketing committee at some point.
Yeah, you've been a committee member. And there are a ton of fantastic, dedicated, energetic, smart, entertaining tour guides on the GANYC.org, GANYC.org website. And that's a really easy way to search. And you can even go through, I think they just redid the website. You can look at a lot of the search terms and a lot of the different options for tours that are listed there, which kind of starts to give you a sense of what's available.
And you know what I use it for a lot? Sometimes I get requests for tours in German. I get a
Mm-hmm.
lot of German requests. And I'm like, I don't know any guides who speak German. So you can search the GANIC guide page by language, by topic. There's a whole
Mm-hmm.
bunch of different ways to search. So
Yeah, look for that find a guide option, and you'll be able to find some really great guides for any of your specific needs.
that's a really, really great option. I'm also a fan of social media, as you probably know. So you can always try to find tour guides. I believe that me and Sarah Funky are two that I know who use social media as our primary
Mm-hmm.
um, advertisement for our tour guide company. But if you use the
I happen
hashtag,
to know excellent guides who work for both of those organizations.
oh, do you? Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Sarah's. I'm a big fan of me. So you can always use social media as that search as well. And I think it's kind of nice because you get an idea of the energy of the guides as
Mm-hmm.
well, especially if you're booking a private tour and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to like jive with the energy. So sometimes the social media is a really great option as well. So just to recap, we have specific Google search terms.
Mm-hmm.
We have the OTAs, which, by the way, I do want to say they are not scams. If you do
Not a scam. No, not at all.
If you do find yourself, however, at Battery Park and
No.
and you find
The
some
scams.
Yeah, you find some people offering you tickets to Statue of Liberty or the Staten Island Ferry, which is free, and they're trying to pay you. I would just say no. I would open up your apps and go to websites of the official booking places, Statue City Cruises. So we have Googling, we have the OTAs, we have Ganic,
Mm-hmm.
and we have social media. So big fans of all
Lots
of those.
of great ways to find the tour for you here in New York City.
Just take a tour. Take a tour.
You'll
They're
love it. We promise.
Good. All right.
If you don't like it, don't sue us. This is our disclaimer. This is generally our disclaimer. You come to New York City, you try to pet Pizza Rat. Did you get bitten? Don't sue us.
Yeah, don't sue us. I do want to just real fast throw out some more names of some tour companies that I really love to help people find them. So in addition to Scott's Pizza Tours, there's also Bob's Pizza Tours, which I've taken. It is really good. My good friend Tim runs a company called Broadway Up Close.
That's a really...
This tour company, if you love theater, I don't even give theater tours. When people ask, I'm like, no, go to Tim.
Yeah, right to Tim.
Go to Broadway Up Close. I'm like, you are the Broadway king. So I just give them all to Tim at Broadway Up Close. In terms of bus tours, I think a lot of people get a bit overwhelmed seeing all these different bus tours. I'm a big fan of The Ride. I find that The Ride kind of makes you feel like you're in that fantasy New York that you've always wanted to experience and be in. In terms of boats, I can't even pick a favorite boat, but Classic Harbor Line, I believe, does the architecture tour that you took.
They do, and their boats are gorgeous. They are vintage boats. They're smaller boats. Those are very customized tours. Circle Line is the classic, and they have a couple of different boat tour options. I love getting out on the water to do a boat tour. And Classic it's just, if you have the extra money, I highly recommend it because they are beautiful boats and it's a beautiful experience.
I agree. And then David and I took the City Experiences Bateau Premier Dinner Cruise.
I forgot about those.
Which we both worked out on tour boats as well, both me and JT. So I do consider myself a tour boat expert. And this was one of my favorite boat experiences. I think it was less of a guided tour and more of a boat experience where you got a really good dinner and then you saw the Statue of Liberty up close. But I was a huge fan of that. There's a fireboat that goes out that you can get onto, the John J. Harvey.
A little bit limited schedule, but definitely an option.
Yeah, so tons of different boats that you can go on. So just wanted to shine a light on all of those because they've provided really wonderful tour experiences for me. And then we also mentioned some of the observation decks and attractions offer tours.
That offer those add-on tours. So Empire State Building does that. Top of the Rock does that. I think that, One World Observatory has a special tour that's in the building as well. So there are a lot of great options for tours. They are out there. Find those tours. Take those tours.
Oh, and
you're going to love it.
The Tenement Museum offers tours. They're amazing.
Yeah, not so much a museum as a guided tour program.
Yes.
That's the thing. I wish they would change their name to the Tenement Experience because they're all small group tours that are very focused on these incredible historical spaces and telling the stories of the people who lived in those spaces. Those are great. I love those.
Yes.
All right. We could spend another hour talking about tours that we love. We are licensed New York City tour guides. We go on a lot of tours and we really believe in it. And we think that you should try it out on your next visit to NYC.
Absolutely. And we would love to show you around, but no matter what, make sure you take a tour because it will help you have your most marvelous New York City experience. Oh, and make sure that you click subscribe because it helps us bring you more episodes like this. And if you have any questions or topics that you would like to see explored,
write us a letter.
Email
write
us
an email.
at mostmarvelousnyc@gmail.com. Thank you so much and have a most marvelous day.
See you soon.